In the quiet, picturesque town of Pine Hill, the horrific murder of Jennifer Johnson has rocked the community. This seemingly peaceful, close-knit suburban community is shattered by a crime of passion and betrayal, revealing the dark side of seemingly ideal lives. The case involves two couples, Daniel and Linda Garner and Mark and Jennifer Johnson, whose lives intertwine in a story that ultimately leads to obsession, deceit, and murder. Daniel Garner is a well-respected architect known for his charming personality and his perfect marriage to Linda, a dedicated elementary school teacher. Mark Johnson is a successful financial advisor who, along with his wife Jennifer, are the Garners' closest friends. Not only do the two couples share neighborhood barbecues and weekend getaways, they also engage in a consensual partner swinging arrangement that initially brings excitement and novelty to their lives. However, beneath the veneer of this unconventional lifestyle, dangerous emotions lurk. Daniel's infatuation with Jennifer slowly turns into an obsession that Linda knows all too well. Jennifer realized the intensity of Daniel's feelings and decided to end the arrangement. But she had no idea that this decision would have fatal consequences. Daniel and Linda had been married for 10 years, and from the outside, their marriage was a model of stability and happiness. Daniel was a successful architect known for his innovative designs and charming personality, while Linda was a third-grade teacher who was well-liked by her students and respected by her colleagues. They lived in a charming house on Maple Street, surrounded by Linda's carefully maintained garden. Mark and Jennifer moved to Pine Hill 5 years ago and quickly became friends with the Garners. Mark was an outgoing person and always the life of the party, while Jennifer was equally popular with her stunning beauty and charming personality. The Johnsons brought new energy to the neighborhood, and their friendship with the Garners flourished due to common interests and mutual respect. At a dinner party hosted by the Garners, accompanied by alcohol and a spirit of adventure, the topic of spouse swapping was first brought up, and surprisingly, the concept did not cause shock but curiosity. Over the next few weeks, the idea was discussed more seriously. Boundaries and rules were agreed upon to ensure that the primary relationship was not affected. The first time they swapped partners was awkward but exciting, which made them want more. Initially, the arrangement seemed to work well, and both couples seemed happier and closer. They maintained their social activities, often hosting parties and vacations together, and their little secrets were only discussed at home or in private gatherings. This novel arrangement brought excitement, and for a time, they felt they had found the perfect balance. However, as time went on, subtle changes began to emerge, especially in Daniel's behavior. He showed unusual attention to Jennifer, often finding excuses to be alone with her. Linda noticed his growing attention, but chose to ignore it, hoping that it was just a phase. Mark also seemed oblivious to this, and in fact, Daniel's obsession with Jennifer was turning into deeper and more disturbing emotion, and he found himself constantly thinking back to his time with her. Daniel's mind kept replaying his encounter with Jennifer, longing to spend more time with her. What started out as a seemingly harmless venture slowly evolved into a disturbing obsession that would have devastating consequences for all involved. Daniel's fascination with Jennifer became more than a simple thrill, and it grew into a full-on obsession. He kept thinking about her, flashing back to their time together at work meetings and family dinners. Construction projects that had once been his passion now seemed insignificant to him, and he began to look for opportunities to get closer to Jennifer, taking on tasks that Mark usually did or inviting the Johnsons over more often. Linda began to notice changes in her husband. At first, she attributed it to the excitement of their new lifestyle, but she soon realized that Daniel's interest in Jennifer went beyond their agreement. When out with the Johnsons, Daniel became irritable and distant, and his conversation often turned to Jennifer's preferences, habits, and personality. One night, while cleaning up after a dinner party, Linda confronted Daniel, but he reacted defensively, interpreting her concerns as jealousy. Linda doesn't want to upset the delicate balance they're established, so she lets go, but she starts paying more attention to Daniel. Her suspicions grow when she catches him staring at Jennifer at a party. Jennifer also starts to pick up on Daniel's growing obsession. At first, she's flattered by his attention, but soon it becomes unsettling. His touch becomes more possessive, and his words become overly intimate. She confides in Mark about her discomfort, but he brushes it off, assuming Daniel is just being more enthusiastic. This indifference leaves Jennifer feeling isolated and helpless. The turning point comes during a weekend trip to a lake house. The trip was meant to be a way for couples to reconnect and enjoy time away from their daily lives. but it highlights Daniel's obsession. He monopolizes Jennifer's time and insists on taking her on a solo trip to the lake, leaving Mark and Linda alone. Tensions run high, and Jennifer's attempts to pull away are subtly thwarted by Daniel one night as they sat around the fire. Daniel said something that crossed a line. He talked about leaving everything behind and starting over with Jennifer and him alone, shocked and upset. Jennifer hurriedly excused herself to go back to her room early. Linda overheard the conversation and confronted Daniel again. This time, although he was no longer dismissive, he still refused to acknowledge the depth of his feeling. Linda became increasingly frustrated. She realized the extent of Daniel's obsession. She loved her husband deeply, but it became increasingly clear that his obsession could destroy their marriage and their friendship with the Johnsons. Despite Linda's efforts to intervene, Daniel's behavior became increasingly out of control. He began to stalk Jennifer outside of scheduled meetings, showed up at her yoga classes, and even showed up at her work under the guise of casual visits. Jennifer's uneasiness gradually turned into fear, and she confided in a close friend who advised her to keep as much distance as possible from Daniel, determined to take control of the situation. Jennifer decided to end the arrangement once and for all, hoping that doing so would bring Daniel back to his senses and allow everyone to move on smoothly without causing further harm. One evening, while Mark is away on business, Daniel makes an unexpected visit to the Johnsons' home. Jennifer, though shocked, lets him in, hoping to avoid a confrontation. As they sit in the living room, an invisible tension hangs in the air. Daniel confesses his feelings to her, painting a picture of a future where they can be together openly. Jennifer, horrified, tries to talk him down, explaining that the arrangement was never intended to be anything more than a brief thrill. However, as Daniel becomes more vocal about his feeling, she becomes increasingly reluctant to let him in. Jennifer's fear turned to anger, and she realized she had to end this quickly to avoid destroying her marriage and her friendship with Linda. She firmly told Daniel that their arrangement was over and that he needed to respect her boundaries and her marriage. Daniel was visibly shaken and tried to convince her to reconsider, but Jennifer was unmoved. Over the next few days, Jennifer avoided Daniel, hoping he would change his mind. She confided in Linda, who listened with a heavy heart. She knew her husband's obsession had crossed the line, and while she wanted to support Jennifer, she also felt a twisted loyalty to Daniel. Linda promised Jennifer that she would talk to Daniel in hopes of easing the tension. However, Daniel's obsession only intensified, and he began to show up at Jennifer's workplace, wait for her to get off work, and leave her notes expressing his undying love. Feeling increasingly insecure, Jennifer decided to confront Daniel one last time, hoping to make him understand the severity of his behavior. They met in a secluded park, away from outside eyes. Jennifer reiterated that their arrangement was over and pointed out that his behavior was unacceptable. She begged him to let go and move on. Daniel couldn't handle the rejection and became desperate. He accused Jennifer of leading him on and playing with his feelings. Jennifer remained calm and insisted that they separate and return to their respective marriages. Meanwhile, Linda quietly followed Daniel to the park, watching the confrontation from a distance with an uneasy heart. She saw the pain on Daniel's face and Jennifer's determination, knowing that this confrontation was inevitable, but also worried about what might happen next. As the argument escalated, Daniel's desperation turned to anger. Jennifer's refusal to cater to his fantasies made him feel personally betrayed. He began to verbally attack her, accusing her of ruining his life. Jennifer held back her tears and stood her ground, unwilling to be intimidated, watching from the sidelines in the shadows. Linda felt a panic and knew she had to intervene before the situation got out of control. She came out of her hiding and called out to Daniel with a trembling voice. Linda's appearance seemed to sober Daniel up from his anger, and he turned to her with a look of confusion and relief on his face. Taking this opportunity, Jennifer quickly left, determined to keep her distance from Daniel. Left alone with her husband, Linda tries to comfort him, telling him they will find a way through this. But deep down, she knows their lives are irreversible. The storm has reached a breaking point, and Jennifer's decision to end the arrangement sets off a chain of events that cannot be undone. As the dust settles, the true extent of Daniel's obsession and Linda's complex role in it will soon emerge, leading to a tragic and violent end. The confrontation in the park has thrown Daniel into turmoil. Jennifer's firm refusal and Linda's unexpected appearance have completely disrupted his inner world. He returns home that night, his mind abuzz with anger. betrayal and despair, Linda senses the storm within him and tries to calm his troubled emotion. Daniel's thoughts became increasingly confused and inconsolable. Over the next few days, his behavior became increasingly erratic, and his moods oscillated between intense anger and deep depression. He stopped going to work and spent his days obsessing over Jennifer's rejection and the injustices he had suffered. Linda's frustration and fear grew as she could not reach him. She knew things had to change, but she was not prepared for the drastic change that was about to happen. Jennifer, on the other hand, was determined to move forward. She avoided all contact with Daniel and devoted herself to her work and her relationship with Mark. She did not tell her husband about the extent of Daniel's obsession. Fearing his reaction and the consequences that might result, Jennifer hoped that by cutting off contact, Daniel would finally accept that their relationship was over and allow her to live on her own. One evening, Jennifer returned home from get off work and found Daniel waiting outside her house. When she saw him, her heart sank and she prepared for another confrontation. She approached cautiously and told him to leave in a firm and calm voice. Daniel, with desperation in his eyes, begged her to give him one last chance to explain himself. Jennifer realized the conversation was pointless and tried to walk around him, but Daniel grabbed her arm and held it so tightly that it hurt, and she saw the madness in his eyes. Jennifer struggled to get away, and her voice became louder, asking him to let go. This attracted the attention of the neighbor, who walked out to check on the situation. Seeing the neighbor, Daniel let go of Jennifer and hurried away, unsettled and terrified. Jennifer thanked the neighbor and hurried back inside, where she called Linda, hoping to find a way to resolve the situation without calling the police. Linda heard the fear in Jennifer's voice and agreed to meet the next day to discuss how to deal with Daniel's increasingly erratic behavior. The next day, at a local cafe, Linda met with Jennifer. Jennifer looked tired and nervous and detailed her encounter with Daniel and her growing fear for her safety. Linda listened intently, thoughts racing through her mind, and she promised to talk to Daniel and let him know that their relationship was over. After the meeting, Linda returned home to find Daniel in agitated mood. She questioned him about what happened between him and Jennifer, her tone mixed with anger and concern. Feeling cornered, Daniel began to fight back, accusing Linda of betraying him by siding with Jennifer. The argument escalated, and Linda retreated to the bedroom. Fearing for her safety, that night Daniel's dark thoughts deepened. He could not accept Jennifer's rejection of him, nor could he bear the fact that his wife seemed to be on the opposite side. In his twisted mind, he believed that the only way to resolve all this pain was to eliminate the source of the pain. He decided that if he couldn't have Jennifer, then no one else could have her. On a cold, clear night, Daniel quietly went to the Johnsons' home. He knew that Mark was out of town, leaving Jennifer alone. He broke into the house through a side window and walked straight to the bedroom, where he saw Jennifer sleeping peacefully, which made his anger and despair even more intense. He grabbed a kitchen knife and walked towards her, his mind filled with a chaotic mixture of love and hate. When Jennifer woke up, she saw Daniel standing over her bed, the blade of the knife flashing in the dim light. She tried to scream, but Daniel covered her mouth with his hand. His power was strong and ruthless. In a fit of rage, he plunged the knife into her chest to silence her. As Jennifer's life slipped away, Daniel stood by her side, conflicted and confused. After the murder, Daniel fled the scene with Jennifer's blood on his hands. When he returned home, Linda found him shaking and incoherent, and she immediately realized what he had done. In a moment of twisted loyalty, she decided to help him cover up this crime, and their lives would never be the same. All the secrets they had built were now at risk. Linda knew they had to act quickly and decisively if they were to survive, out of a twisted instinct of loyalty and self-preservation. Linda quickly took control of the situation and guided Daniel to the bathroom, instructing him to remove his clothes and rinse off the blood. A sense of urgency filled her mind, knowing she had to act quickly to cover up the crime and protect their secret life. As Daniel stood under the hot shower, the water turning pink at his feet, Linda quickly gathered his clothes and placed them in a plastic bag. She carefully wiped the floor where he had walked, making sure to eliminate any traces of blood. Once Daniel was done, she sat him down and pressed him to recall everything that had happened in detail. Despite the emotion, Daniel managed to provide a coherent narrative, his voice shaking with the weight of his action. Linda devised a plan. They needed to create an alibi and get rid of any evidence related to the crime. She called a trusted friend and claimed that Daniel had been with her all night to ensure their alibi was supported. She then drove to a secluded spot outside of town and burned Daniel's bloodstained clothing and the murder weapon, praying that the flames would consume any remaining evidence. Police investigated everyone in the neighborhood, including the Garners. Linda's carefully constructed alibi held up under scrutiny, and Daniel, though visibly anxious, managed to avoid arousing suspicion. The investigation seemed to stall with no solid leads pointing to the Garners despite their initial success in evading the authorities. The psychological burden of the murder weighed heavily on Daniel and Linda. Daniel became increasingly paranoid, convinced that the police were closing in on him. He began to distance himself from friends and colleagues, isolating himself in a web of fear and regret. Linda, though outwardly calm, felt the mounting pressure of her secret and became hypervigilant, scrutinizing the interactions and behavior of everyone around her for any suspicious sign. The weeks following Jennifer's murder were a blur of tension and deception for the Garners. Linda assumed the role of stabilizer, managing Daniel's paranoia while ensuring that their public image remained intact. She closely followed the news, hoping for progress on the investigation, and was relieved to find that the police seemed to have no real leads. However, Linda knew that maintaining the cover would require more than just an alibi. They would also need to create a story that would divert attention away from Daniel. She advised Daniel to appear more grief-stricken over Jennifer's death to cater to the community's mourning and distract from any suspicion at social gatherings and community meetings. Daniel played the role of the grieving friend, speaking of Jennifer in a way that was a mixture of nostalgia and sadness, often with tears in his eyes. Mark was grateful for this, desperate for answers, but never doubting that his friend had anything to do with his wife's death. However, Daniel's mental state deteriorated further, and his guilt manifested itself in the form of nightmares and hallucinations. He began to drink heavily, hoping to find solace in alcohol, but ultimately only achieved a short escape, fearing that he would confess while drunk. Linda kept an eye on him, often staying up late to make sure he didn't leave the house. One night, as Daniel slumped over a glass of whiskey, he broke down. He confessed to Linda that he could no longer bear the guilt and needed to confess the truth. Linda panicked and tried to soothe him to keep them calm. To help him regain his composure, she suggested that the two of them leave town for a short while. They headed to a remote cabin in the mountains, hoping that a change of scenery would allow Daniel to regain some peace. The isolation provided a temporary respite, allowing them to plan their next steps without the pressure of an investigation. During the days at the cabin, Linda constantly stressed the importance of confidentiality. She coached Daniel on how to handle police questioning and interactions with the public until he could answer questions without hesitation. Linda's determination to protect their way of life and her urgency to avoid incarceration drove her to relentlessly maintain their story. After returning to Pine Mountain, the Garners resumed their lives with a new sense of purpose. Although Daniel was still troubled by his behavior, he managed to appear more stable. Linda continued to manage their interactions with the community, ensuring that they were not suspected. However, their cover began to show cracks. Friends and neighbors noticed Daniel's increased drinking and erratic behavior, and rumors began to spread that he might have been involved in Jennifer's death. Linda remained vigilant and worked to suppress these rumors, but she knew that time was running out as the police investigation deepened. New evidence surfaced, revealing inconsistencies in Daniel's alibi. The world that the Garners had carefully constructed was coming to an end, and the truth was closer than ever to being revealed. Detective Mitchell interviewed the Garners separately, noting any discrepancies in their stories. Linda's carefully crafted alibi stood up to scrutiny, and Daniel's emotional state seemed consistent with that of a grieving friend. However, Mitchell's instincts told her that there was more to the story. As time passed, new evidence emerged, and a forensic analysis of Jennifer's cell phone records revealed a series of increasingly desperate text messages from Daniel that indicated his obsession with her. Mitchell summoned Daniel again for further questioning, pressing him about inconsistencies in his alibi and the nature of his relationship with Jennifer. Daniel tried to remain calm and stick to the story Linda had taught him, but his nervousness and evasive responses only deepened detective suspicion. The tide turned when a neighbor came forward with crucial information. They recalled seeing Daniel's car parked near the Johnsons' home on the night of the murder and noticing strange behavior he was displaying. This testimony, combined with forensic evidence and Daniel's unusual behavior, enabled police to obtain a warrant to search the Garners' home. During the search, police found remnants of burnt clothing and blood that had seeped into the floorboards despite Linda's thorough cleanup. This damning evidence, along with eyewitness testimony and cell phone records, paints a clear picture of Daniel's guilt. As the police close in on the Garners, Linda realizes that their carefully constructed cover is about to unravel. She knows that their only way to escape a lengthy prison sentence is to devise a new plan that will shift the blame onto someone else. As the police close in, Linda and Daniel are forced to face reality. The lies and deceptions they once protected them from now threaten to completely collapse. And the truth is about to surface in ways they could not have anticipated. As the evidence against Daniel continues to mount, Mitchell is ready to act. Summoning Daniel for questioning again, this time taking a different approach, she lays before him all the evidence she has collected, including cell phone record, eyewitness testimony, and forensic finding. Feeling he had nowhere to turn, Daniel finally began to break under the pressure. He confessed to killing Jennifer, detailing his obsession, confrontation, and the moment he lost control. However, in his confession, he also implicated Linda, revealing her role in covering up the crime. He detailed how Linda helped him clean up the scene, dispose of evidence, and create an alibi. Mitchell seized the opportunity and brought Linda in for questioning. When she was confronted with Daniel's confession, she initially denied any involvement. But as Mitchell detailed the evidence and Daniel's account, Linda realized there was no way out. Eventually, she admitted to helping Daniel, explaining that it was out of a misplaced sense of loyalty and fear of losing everything. Daniel was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole, while Linda was sentenced to 15 years due to her cooperation with the investigation and her good past record. Meanwhile, Mark Johnson struggled to rebuild his life, and although he found some comfort in the fact that justice had been served, he still missed his wife deeply.